I never thought feeding the horses at dawn would lead me to uncovering a lie that could tear my world apart. It was still dark when I stepped into the barn. Just me, the cold air, and the steady rhythm of my boots on the old wooden floor. I came to do what I always do: feed, check water, whisper a few words to the animals like they're old friends. But something was off that morning. There was a tension in the air I couldn't name, a heaviness that settled deep in my gut. I didn't see the tarp until I tripped over it. It was tucked behind the hay bales, weighted down like someone had tried to hide it in plain sight. I pulled it back, more out of instinct than intention, and froze. There, wrapped in plastic, was something that didn't belong. A shirt. Jacob's shirt. The one he always wore when he worked the fields. Stained across the chest with something dark, dried, and ominous. Next to it, a small leather-bound diary. Old. Worn. I picked it up and turned it over. My breath caught in my throat. Marlene's name was written on the cover in her handwriting. That's when everything shifted. My son Jacob died 3 months ago. The coroner called it an accident, a fall from the loft in this very barn. Closed case. But now I wasn't so sure. Especially not after what Marlene told me just last night. We were sitting in the kitchen, quiet between us like a third person in the room. I asked about the diary. I remembered Jacob used to write when he was young. She said he'd burned all of it. Said it was better that way. Too many memories, she claimed. Nothing left to hold on to. Well, that was a lie. And if she lied about the diary, what else wasn't true? I slipped the book into my coat pocket, heart pounding in my chest. My fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of knowing. The barn felt different now, like it was watching me. Like the truth had been hiding there, buried just beneath my feet, waiting for me to dig it up. I walked out slowly, every step heavy with questions I wasn't ready to ask. What if Jacob's death wasn't an accident? What if someone made sure it looked like one? And what if that someone was still living under my roof? The farm has fences, yes. Laws. Police. But it's also a quiet place. Isolated. The kind of place where secrets go to rot, unnoticed. As I reached the porch, I looked out over the fields Jacob used to work. For the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own land. But not helpless. I may be older, but I am not weak. I've buried a husband. I've raised a son. I've built a life with my hands and held it together through storms bigger than this. Still, what I saw this morning changed everything. And if Marlene thinks I'm just some old woman who won't fight back, well, she's about to learn how wrong she is. By morning, the sky had turned soft and golden, pouring through the lace curtains like it always did, but nothing felt the same. I sat at the kitchen table, tea growing cold between my hands. The diary sat beside me, closed but not forgotten. I hadn't opened it yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew whatever was inside would change the way I remembered Jacob. And maybe even how I saw myself. I stared at the cover for a long time. My hands still trembled, not from fear anymore, but from something deeper. Regret. I should have seen it. The little signs. The way Jacob pulled away during his last few months. The way Marlene spoke for him more and more, like he couldn't make decisions without her. I brushed it off as stress, as grief from losing the harvest, from the financial strain. But now I wasn't so sure. Was I naive? Too trusting? Or just too afraid to believe that someone living under my roof might have had something to gain from Jacob's absence? Then the phone rang. I jumped like a guilty woman, even though I hadn't done a thing wrong. It was Marlene. Her voice came through sweet as syrup, calm, almost tender. "Hey, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we let the farm go," she said, like she was doing me a favor. "Too many bad memories for both of us. Maybe we could sell it, start fresh somewhere else." I didn't respond. Not at first. Just listened. My eyes drifted back to the diary. The same one she told me was gone. The one she said Jacob destroyed. Why lie? Why hide? "Think about it," she said, her tone still soft. "It's too much for you to manage alone." I muttered something polite, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long while. Was this her plan? Make me feel weak. Make me feel alone. Push me to let go of the only thing that still connects me to my son. Not happening. I picked up the diary. My fingers brushed over Jacob's name, scrawled in the margins of the first page like a whisper from the past. My heart clenched. He used to write in journals when he was a boy. He'd hide them under his mattress. I'd find them, read a few lines when I changed the sheets, and feel like I was stealing pieces of his soul. Now here I was, years later, holding the last words he might have ever written. I pressed the cover to my chest. Then I made a decision. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who would believe me. Someone who wouldn't look at me like an old woman chasing ghosts. I needed a witness. Ada, my oldest friend. The one who'd always known when I was hurting, before I ever said a word. Tomorrow, I'd take the diary to her. And together, we'd open it. The porch creaked beneath my rocking chair, just like it used to when Jacob would sneak out after dark, thinking I wouldn't hear him. I'd always hear him. That porch has carried every stage of his life, his first steps, his teenage tantrums, the quiet mornings when we'd sit side by side, sipping coffee in silence. Back then, the silence was comforting. Now it's too loud. I held the diary in my lap but didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I let my eyes settle on the barn in the distance, glowing soft under the dusk sky. The same barn where I used to find Jacob pretending to be a cowboy, tossing rope over the rafters, shouting at invisible cattle. He loved that place more than anything. And that's what hurts the most. The idea that his death, his so-called accident, might have happened right there, where he once felt safest. Marlene came into our lives like a summer storm, pretty, polite, and always just a little too distant. Jacob loved her, I don't doubt that. But I always felt like I was speaking into a void when I talked to her. I'd ask about their plans, and she'd smile like I was asking too many questions. She'd steer the conversation somewhere else, usually toward money, logistics, efficiency. Over time, Jacob stopped sharing. Not just with me, with himself too. That bright-eyed boy who once told me he'd keep the farm running no matter what, he started looking tired. Overworked. Disconnected. I used to blame the economy. The bills. The drought. Life wears you down, I told myself. But now I wonder if it was something else entirely. I remember overhearing them argue late one night. I was coming back from the well, and their voices drifted out through the open kitchen window. She was telling him to sell. The farm's bleeding money, Jacob. We could be living in the city by now. You're wasting your life here. His voice was lower, almost pleading. It's not just a farm, Marlene. It's my home. It's hers too. Mine. Ours. I should have stepped in right then and there. But I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place. That they were adults. That I had to let him live his own life. But the truth? I let her chip away at him. Slowly, quietly, with a smile. She convinced him to take out loans. Talked him into projects that never made sense. Said she was managing things. But all she was managing was the erosion of the life we built here. And I let it happen. That's what haunts me now. Not just the possibility that Jacob didn't die the way they said, but that I wasn't paying attention when it mattered most. But not anymore. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and somewhere a hawk called out, slicing the silence. I looked down at the diary one more time. I'm not ready to open it. Not yet. But I am ready to remember who I am. And this time, I will not be erased. I hadn't been to Mr. Stanton's office in years. Not since my husband passed. The building smelled the same, old leather chairs, coffee gone bitter in the pot, dust settled in corners no one bothered to clean. Familiar. Solid. The kind of place that makes you feel like the truth still has a place to stand. He looked up as I walked in, eyebrows lifting with something close to recognition. Mrs. Callahan, he said, standing. What can I do for you? I pulled the diary from my coat like it was a confession. He took it gently, turning it over in his hands like a fragile thing. I think, I said slowly, my son's death wasn't an accident. And I think someone close to us lied. He didn't laugh. He didn't look at me like I'd lost my mind. He simply opened the first page and started reading. The room fell into a hush so deep I could hear the wall clock ticking. He flipped through entry after entry, his brow furrowing tighter, his fingers pausing now and then on certain lines. When he finally looked up, there was no doubt in his voice. "If what's written here is true," he said, "there's a case for reopening the investigation. This isn't just grief, Mrs. Callahan. These are statements, names, financial records, pressure, possible coercion." Coercion. That word felt like a steel rod down my spine. But just as hope began to rise in my chest, his office phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and grimaced. "It's Marlene's lawyer," he said quietly. "She's already heard you came in." He answered, his voice calm and professional. I couldn't hear the other side, but I didn't need to. I could see the shift in his eyes, first surprise, then disbelief, then something that looked a lot like anger. When he hung up, he looked at me hard. "They offered a settlement to make this go away. And a warning, if you pursue this, they'll go after your reputation. Say you're unstable, unfit to handle legal matters. They're prepared to make this ugly." I let that sink in. That's when I knew. They were scared. "You don't offer hush money unless you've got something to hide. Do you still want to proceed?" he asked. I looked him square in the eye. "I'm not backing down." He nodded once. "Then let's meet tomorrow. Privately. I'll bring a recorder, a notary. We'll start building your case." I left his office lighter than I'd felt in months. The sky outside had clouded over, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the beginning of a storm I was ready to walk through. I was in the garden when I found it. The roses were blooming wild this year, stretching higher than they had in seasons past. Jacob used to joke they were trying to outgrow the fence. I had my gloves on, dirt under my nails, pruning back the deadheads when something made me pause. The old wooden toolbox sat near the shed, Jacob's. I hadn't opened it since the week after the funeral. Just couldn't bring myself to. But something pulled me toward it that day, like a whisper in the back of my mind. I flipped the latch and opened the lid. Beneath the wrenches and oil-stained rags, something caught my eye, a hammer wrapped in cloth. Strange. Jacob didn't wrap his tools. He believed in using them, not preserving them. I unwrapped it slowly. There, on the wooden handle, was a dark smear, dried into the grain. Blood. Not fresh, but not ancient either. My stomach turned. I reached out, ran my gloved thumb across it. Then I wrapped it back up just as carefully and placed it in a separate bag. Why would someone hide that? Why not throw it away? Why keep it, only to bury it under everything else? I didn't have answers yet, but I had one more question. That's when I heard her voice. "Mrs. Callahan." I turned, and there she was. Marlene, standing at the edge of the garden, looking polished and pleasant in that way only people with something to hide manage. She walked toward me like we were old friends, arms already open. She hugged me. I didn't hug back. "You look tired," she said sweetly. "The farm's a lot, especially now. I've been thinking, maybe I could take over the day-to-day things. The finances, the paperwork. You should rest. Take care of yourself." She even reached for my hand, soft and slow, like she was comforting a child. The gall. "I appreciate the concern," I said, forcing a smile. "But I'm not dead yet." She laughed, nervous, not genuine. "Of course not. I just meant, well, you've done so much. Maybe it's time to let someone else carry the load." I nodded like I was considering it. But inside? Inside, I was burning. I knew what she was doing. Trying to lull me into stepping aside. Handing over power while I was still breathing. Not a chance. After she left, I stood alone in the garden, the hammer still in its bag behind me, the diary now tucked in my apron pocket like armor. She thought I was soft, tired, ripe for retreat, but I was watching now. And I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. Not anymore. I drove to Ada's house just as the sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the gravel road. The sky was pink and gold, too pretty for the kind of burden I carried in my passenger seat. Ada opened the door before I even knocked. That's how it's always been between us. We've known each other since Jacob was in diapers and our husbands used to fix tractors side by side. She took one look at me and said, "Sit down. I'll put the kettle on." We didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid the diary on her table. Then I placed the hammer beside it. The cloth was still damp from the dew in my garden. She looked at the items, then at me. "I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind," I said. "I need you to be honest." Ada didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached across the table, placed her hand over mine, and gave it a squeeze. "You're not crazy," she said softly. "You're grieving. And you're finally seeing things for what they are." I hadn't realized I was crying until I felt the tears drip off my jaw onto the table. "I missed so many signs," I whispered. "I thought I was protecting him, but I let her isolate him. I let her make him small." Ada leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing with focus. "Marlene always rubbed me the wrong way," she said. "Too polished. Too careful. She was always trying to look like she belonged, but never once helped at the town fair. Never once volunteered at the harvest drive. Always watching. Always calculating." Then she looked at me. "You're not alone in this. But you need more than sympathy, you need backup. Witnesses. Records. Law." I nodded. "Mr. Stanton's helping me. He says we have enough to start something real." She got up, walked to her filing cabinet, and returned with a small notebook. "You'll need more than what you have. Lily might help." "Lily? Your granddaughter," Ada said gently. "She was close to Jacob, wasn't she? And she's smart. If anyone knows what was happening behind closed doors, it's her." I hadn't thought to ask Lily. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wasn't sure she'd believe me. Marlene was still her mother. "I'll call her," I said. Ada looked out the window and her face changed, a shadow crossing her features. "Do it soon." I followed her gaze. Across the road, half hidden behind a tree, was a dark-colored car. Someone watching. Marlene. She had seen me come to Ada's. She knew. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was being watched. But that only confirmed one thing. I was getting close. Lily's room still had the posters I helped her hang when she was 13. Half the paint was chipped, and a stack of college books sat on the nightstand beside a lamp that buzzed when it flickered. It was the one place in the house that still felt untouched by all the noise, by Marlene's polish, by the grief, by the lies. She sat cross-legged on the bed, holding Jacob's diary in her lap like it might break. The hammer lay wrapped beside her. "Grandma," she started, her voice small. This is a lot." I nodded. "I know." We were quiet for a long time, just the two of us breathing in the dust and memory. She opened the diary. I watched her eyes move across Jacob's handwriting, familiar loops, that stubborn way he never dotted his I's. Her fingers trembled. "I thought Mom said this was gone." "She did." Lily looked up at me. "She told me Dad wanted it all burned. That he didn't want to leave any of it behind. Do you believe that now?" She hesitated. Then slowly, she shook her head. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "I thought you were exaggerating. I thought, maybe you were just grieving. But this." She flipped to one of the final pages and pointed at a line Jacob had written in shaky pen. "If anything happens to me, don't let her sell the farm. She doesn't love it. She never did." Lily's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she closed the book and looked at me straight. "I believe you." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until the tears came again. Later that night, I sat on the porch while she went to her room. The stars were bright, sharp even, and the air had that stillness that only comes when a storm is deciding whether to break. Then her phone buzzed. She showed me the message. "From Marlene. You're being manipulated by your grandmother. I've always protected you. Don't let her fill your head with nonsense." Lily stared at the screen, then locked the phone and placed it face down. "She's scared," she said, more to herself than to me. "She should be." Lily turned to me. "I want to help. Whatever you need. I want to know the truth." I reached over and held her hand. "You're braver than I was at your age," I said. "And smarter." She smiled faintly, but there was steel in her eyes now. We weren't just two women on the edge of grief anymore. We were a team. The moon was high when I crept into the storage shed, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. The air smelled of rust and mice, and the old boards groaned like they didn't want me there. But I had to know. Jacob had once told me, years ago, that if anything ever went wrong, he'd keep his insurance in the place no one but he and I ever went. The shed behind the corral, buried beneath the old lumber he never had time to toss. I found the box within 10 minutes. Metal, locked. The crowbar did its job. Inside were papers, sealed envelopes, receipts, photographs, copies of emails. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Most were financial. Some were letters from Jacob to an attorney I'd never heard of, asking about reversing signatures he said he'd been coerced into. There was even a note with Marlene's handwriting on it, something about finalizing the power of attorney papers, and keeping this between us. I stuffed everything into my coat. But I wasn't alone. The next morning, I got the call. Mr. Stanton's voice was clipped. Controlled. Marlene's lawyer filed a motion for temporary guardianship of the estate. I almost dropped the phone. She claims you've been emotionally unstable. That you're hoarding Jacob's belongings in a way that's concerning. Says you're refusing medical appointments, and that you're endangering yourself and others. Lies, I whispered. He sighed. I know. But they've also sent someone to change the locks on the guest house. They're trying to seal rooms off before a hearing can be scheduled. The blood drained from my face. They want to trap me in my own home. They want control, he said. That evening, I met Ada in town, handed her the box, and we placed everything in her safe. If they wanted to bury Jacob's memory, they'd have to dig deep and get through us. On the way home, I saw Lily standing in the driveway, phone in hand, eyes wide. They're in the kitchen, she said quietly. 2 men in suits. They say they're here for an inspection. I looked at her, calm and cold. Let them wait. We went through the side door and locked ourselves in the back office. I called the sheriff next. I'm ready, I said into the phone. You sure? More than I've ever been. Outside, the farm looked like it always had. Trees swaying, the barn still, the house warm and quiet. But everything was changing, and if Marlene thought legal tricks and sealed rooms would break me, she was about to find out what it means to corner a woman who has nothing left to lose, and something precious left to protect. Mr. Stanton had his sleeves rolled up when I arrived, papers spread across the desk like a battlefield. The smell of coffee and printer ink clung to the air. You were right to act fast, he said, motioning for me to sit. What you brought back from that shed, those letters, receipts, notes, those hold weight. Legal weight. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't dared feel. Relief. He pointed to a folder. This letter here, Jacob writing to another attorney, expressing regret about signing over farm rights under duress. That alone might be enough to question the legitimacy of those documents. I exhaled, the kind that shakes loose from your chest after carrying too much. And the photos? I asked. Circumstantial, but paired with the diary and your testimony? It paints a picture. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. You're not imagining things, Mrs. Callahan. This is a case. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It wasn't justice yet, but it was validation. Then he reached for a new envelope. Marlene's team filed a challenge against the authenticity of one of the letters. They claim it's forged. Of course they did. They're saying it was written after Jacob's death. That the handwriting doesn't match his official records. They're going to push that narrative hard in court, and likely in town. I nodded, already bracing for it. She's trying to discredit me before I can speak. And she'll try harder now, he said, looking me in the eye. Because she's losing ground. I stood to leave, folder clutched tight to my chest. He added, you're going to need more than letters. Witnesses. Physical evidence. Testimony from someone inside that house. I paused. Lily, I said, then it's time we talk to the sheriff. Officially. Outside, the wind was colder, but I didn't flinch. My boots hit the gravel with new purpose. I was no longer just defending myself. I was defending Jacob's name, his legacy, his voice, the one they thought they could silence. Back at the farm, I saw Lily sitting by the window, phone in her lap. Her face was pale, eyes glued to a post on social media. "She's saying you made it all up," Lily whispered. "That you forged the diary. That you're mentally unwell. She's already got people commenting." I sat beside her. "She's scared. That's why she's yelling." Lily turned to me. "What do we do now?" I reached over, rested my hand on hers. "We keep walking. And we walk louder." She nodded, quiet but firm. The wind rattled the windows. The house creaked under the pressure of history. Let it creak. I wasn't moving. Sheriff Martinez didn't say much when I walked into the precinct with Lily at my side, but his eyes shifted the moment he saw what I carried. The diary, the stained hammer, and a letter of intent, prepared by Mr. Stanton. "This isn't a complaint," I said. "This is a formal request for an investigation into the death of my son, Jacob Callahan." The sheriff motioned us into his office, closed the door, and gestured for Lily to sit across from him. "I need your full statement," he said. "Not just hearsay. Not feelings. Facts." Lily pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app. "I have a recording," she said, "of my mom telling me last year that she took care of the paperwork because Dad was too emotional to think clearly. She said she made him sign things after the accident with the tractor." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You kept this secret?" "I didn't understand what it meant back then," Lily replied. "But now? I think she coerced him into signing everything over. His will, the power of attorney documents, even control of the bank accounts." I placed the hammer on the desk next. "I found this hidden under his tools," I said. "There's dried blood. He always cleaned his equipment. Always. That stain didn't get there by accident." Martinez studied both items for a long time. Then he looked at Lily again. "Do you swear everything you've said is true?" "I do." He scribbled notes, then sat back in his chair. "All right. I'm going to log this. We'll start with the tool, send it for testing. The diary's going into evidence. And we'll open the file." I felt like I'd been holding my breath for 3 months. Then came the twist I should have expected. That night, Lily got a text. "Stop. Don't ruin your life for your grandmother's fantasy. If you testify, you'll be cut out of everything. That house, your future, it's over. I protected you." Marlene Lily showed me the screen. "She's threatening me," she said. "She's trying to scare you. She's not going to win." That was the first time I saw the fire in her eyes, not the flicker of doubt, but the full burn of conviction. The next morning, she stood with me in front of the courthouse and gave her statement under oath. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. And when she finished, Sheriff Martinez nodded and said the words I'd been aching to hear. "We're opening the case." Outside, the wind kicked up dust in the streets, and I could already feel the town stirring. Some would believe us. Others wouldn't. Rumors were coming, but the silence was broken now. And the truth had a name. Twilight draped the barn in shadows when I stepped inside. It smelled of hay, old sweat, and the ghosts of everything Jacob left behind. Dust motes danced in the fading light, and for a moment, I forgot why I came. I could almost hear his laughter, young, reckless, echoing through the rafters. I could almost see him, boots too big, trying to toss hay bales twice his size. This place raised him, and now, it held the weight of how he might have died. I walked to the spot where I'd found the tarp weeks ago, my boots crunching over the same dry floorboards. The silence was different now. It wasn't empty, it was charged, as if the barn itself knew what we were about to uncover. I ran my fingers along the wooden beam above the loft ladder. Jacob had carved a small J into the side when he was 10. I'd told him not to mark the wood. He said he wanted to leave proof he'd been there. Proof. That's all I'd ever wanted too. Behind me, the barn door creaked open. It was Lily. "She's here," she whispered. "Marlene." My stomach tightened. We moved together, silent as ghosts, until we spotted her near the back wall. Marlene, holding a shovel, digging around the tarp area like she was searching for something, or trying to move it. My voice rang out before I even knew I was speaking. Looking for this? She froze. I stepped forward, the barn swallowing my steps, each one louder than her breathing. You knew I'd come back, I said. So you came to erase the evidence. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Lily stepped beside me. We already gave the diary to the sheriff, she said. And the hammer. They're in evidence now. Marlene dropped the shovel. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. I didn't kill him, she said quickly. He wasn't well. He was paranoid. He didn't trust anyone. And yet, I said softly, he trusted me enough to hide everything where only I could find it. She stepped back. I was scared, she hissed. I didn't want to lose everything he built. I thought he'd change his mind. I thought if I controlled it for a while. You didn't just take control, I snapped. You erased him. You lied about what he wanted. You tried to bury everything he loved, including this farm. The barn was dead quiet. Then Lily spoke. I don't know who you are anymore, Mom. But I know who my father was. Marlene looked between us, panicked. But the damage was done. And for the first time, I felt no fear. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was the storm at the gates. By the time the sun dipped behind the courthouse steps, I was already sitting across from Mr. Stanton, watching him slide affidavit after affidavit into a thick manila folder. We have enough now, he said quietly. Between the diary, the blood-stained hammer, Lily's statement, and Marlene's behavior in the barn, this isn't just suspicion. This is a case. I nodded. I want to go public, I said. I want people to know who Jacob really was, and what was done to him. He hesitated. You understand that means war. She won't just sit back. She'll retaliate. I know. I handed him a USB drive. There's more. Photos of her forging his signature. A document she altered. My neighbor saw her burning papers behind the house the night Jacob died. He slipped the drive into a locked drawer and leaned back. You're not just building a case. You're dismantling hers. I left his office with a plan. That night, I sat in front of my kitchen window, the farmhouse lit only by the porch light, and wrote the statement I would later give to the local paper. I told the truth, not just about Jacob's death, but about the erosion that came before it. The manipulation, the isolation, the way Marlene painted herself as protector while chipping away at everything Jacob loved. By morning, the article was published. The town woke up different. Some people reached out with support, old friends of Jacob, farmers from neighboring counties, even folks I barely knew at church. Others recoiled, uncertain, uncomfortable with the idea that a widow might be right and a grieving wife might be hiding something more sinister. But I didn't care. This wasn't about comfort. This was about justice. And just as I expected, Marlene fought back. She hired a private investigator to dig into my past, called it concern for public safety. Claimed I was unfit to manage the property, that I had fabricated everything out of grief. She even tried to intimidate Ada, calling her at midnight, accusing her of meddling. But Ada? She just laughed and recorded the call. Lily, too, got messages from anonymous numbers, threats, offers, pressure. We kept every single one. The case was no longer a whisper in the fields. It was front-page news. And people were choosing sides. But I didn't flinch. I'd spent years shrinking myself for the sake of peace. Now I was standing in the storm, and finding out I was built for it. The town hall was packed. I stood at the podium, palms steady, the diary open before me. Faces I'd known for decades stared back, neighbors, church folks, old classmates of Jacob's. Even the mayor had shown up, arms crossed, trying to look neutral. I never asked for pity, I began. I only ever asked for the truth. Then I read, just one entry. She told me not to tell Mom. That the papers were just temporary. That it was better this way until we figured things out. I signed, but something felt wrong. I didn't want to give her the land, not forever. I don't think she'll give it back. Murmurs rippled through the room. I turned a page, read again. If anything happens to me, tell Mom to find the shed. Everything she needs is there. She'll know what to do. I looked up. Jacob didn't leave us. He was taken, not with violence, but with pressure, with lies, with control. Then the interruption. I object to this circus, Marlene's voice rang out from the back. She stood, dressed in dark blue, eyes hard and glistening. Her lawyer stepped forward beside her. This is slander, he said. This woman, grieving or not, has fabricated a story built on altered documents and emotional manipulation. And we have proof. He pulled a small speaker from his briefcase. A recording played. Jacob's voice, calm, clipped, almost robotic. I gave her power of attorney. I trust her. I don't want to discuss this anymore. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. But I didn't panic, because I knew that voice. And I knew when my son was being recorded under pressure. I don't deny that's Jacob, I said, stepping back to the microphone. But what you just played, he said those words when she was threatening to take Lily. When he thought he had no other option. I held up my phone. And I have something, too. The sheriff stood from his seat and nodded. I pressed play. A clip from a security camera. Grainy, but clear enough. Marlene, digging in the barn. Carrying the tarp. Moving the hammer. The room went still. Then came the whispers. That's not an accident, someone said aloud. She was hiding something. She said it was all clean. Marlene stepped back, her face pale. This isn't fair, she hissed. You don't know what it was like, he was losing his mind. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They were watching the sheriff, who was now holding up a sealed evidence bag. The judge called for a recess. Reporters followed us out. And I realized something. Truth doesn't shout. It waits. But when it finally speaks, people listen. The courtroom was silent when I took the stand. Even the air felt tense, thick with everything unspoken. The lies, the grief, the quiet knowing that today, something was going to break. I looked across at Marlene. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Good. Under oath, I recounted everything. The diary, the hammer, the letters, the shed, the night she was caught in the barn. I told them about Jacob's voice, the difference between what he said when he was afraid and what he wrote when he thought no one would ever find his words. The prosecutor paced slowly. Why didn't you come forward sooner, Mrs. Callahan? I trusted her, I said. That was my mistake. I believed that grief made people strange. But now I know, grief didn't twist the truth. Control did. Then it was Marlene's turn. She took the stand with her lips pressed tight, her posture perfect, every move calculated. She denied everything, said the diary was a fabrication, that I forged the letters, that Jacob was spiraling emotionally, paranoid, blaming her for problems that were never her fault. He was unstable, she said, voice trembling just enough to look human. He begged me to take over the paperwork. I was trying to help. But then the prosecutor brought out the recording from the barn, the video of her digging, moving evidence. Marlene froze. Can you explain why you were tampering with material evidence the night before this trial? He asked. She stammered. I didn't know what it was. I panicked. I thought she planted something. I was trying to protect what little I had left. And that's when Lily stood. Not dramatic, just quiet and clear. My father told me he regretted signing anything over, she said. He tried to undo it. My mother told me to forget it, that he wasn't thinking straight. But I saw her destroy his notebooks. I saw her burn the last things he wrote. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Ada testified next, about the threats, the late-night calls, the fear Marlene tried to instill in anyone who stood beside me. And then the final blow. Sheriff Martinez stepped up with the lab results from the hammer. Traces of blood, matched to Jacob Callahan. No fingerprints but his. But the angle and location suggest it wasn't a simple fall. He didn't drop it. He hit something. Or someone. The courtroom cracked open then, whispers turning to noise. Marlene broke. Not loudly. Not with sobs. But with silence. She looked down at her lap and didn't speak another word. The judge called for a recess. And as the bailiff escorted her out, I caught her glance one last time. Not hatred, not even fear, Just the hollow look of someone who realized the story they built was falling apart, because someone finally dared to question it. The courtroom felt different that afternoon. The tension was still there, sure, but now it had shifted. Like the tide had turned. Like the walls themselves were listening. Marlene sat at the defendant's table, stiff as a statue, her eyes hollow. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, but she didn't respond. Whatever script she'd been rehearsing had finally unraveled. And it was my turn to finish what she started. I rose and walked slowly to the witness stand. This wasn't about vengeance. Not anymore. This was about Jacob, about the truth he never got to speak aloud. The prosecutor gestured. Mrs. Callahan, in your words, what do you believe happened to your son? I took a deep breath. I believe he was pressured, isolated, and manipulated into giving away everything he loved. I believe he tried to pull away, but by then, she already had too much power over him. And when he pushed back, I believe Marlene made sure his voice wouldn't be heard again. Then Lily was called. She walked slowly, her voice trembling, but clear. My mother told me to forget the things Dad said. That he was tired, confused, unstable. But I remember everything. I remember the fear in his eyes. The way he said, if anything happens, go to Grandma. She'll understand. And then came Ada. She didn't waste words. She tried to silence us all. But the more she pushed, the more we remembered. Marlene's lawyer stood and objected, called it hearsay, emotional manipulation, a witch hunt. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. Enough, she said. Let the evidence speak. And then came the security footage again, the shovel, the tarp, Marlene's silhouette in the barn she claimed she never entered after Jacob's death. The judge asked one final question. Ms. Marlene Callahan, do you have anything to say before we recess for verdict? Marlene stood slowly. Her voice cracked, not with tears, but with fury barely contained. I didn't mean for any of this, she whispered. He wouldn't listen. He kept talking about the land, about legacy. He refused to leave. He said he'd never sign again, never let me touch the farm. Her voice rose now. I built that life with him. I kept it running. I did everything for him, while you, she snapped, looking at me, sat in your house pretending your son could do no wrong. But the courtroom was still. And the silence that followed wasn't sympathy. It was judgment. I looked her in the eye. You didn't lose control, I said softly. You gave it away, one lie at a time. The judge nodded. We'll reconvene at noon tomorrow for the verdict. As I stood and turned toward Lily, her hand found mine. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, rooted, and ready. We stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, just past noon. The air was heavy, full of whispers, reporters, neighbors, people who once smiled politely at the grocery store and now eyed me like I'd become someone else. But I hadn't changed. I'd just finally spoken. The courtroom doors opened, and we filed in. Lily squeezed my hand once. Ada sat behind us, firm as stone. Marlene sat at her table, lips tight, her lawyer no longer whispering strategies, just waiting, like the rest of us. The judge's voice was even. In the matter of the estate of Jacob Callahan, and the motion to overturn power of attorney and posthumous asset transfer. My heart thudded once. Then again. We find the documentation signed under coercion. The estate will revert to the original title, Mrs. Callahan. My knees nearly buckled. Additionally, Ms. Marlene Callahan is found to have submitted false documents and engaged in obstruction of evidence during an active investigation. Gasps echoed across the room. Marlene paled. The court revokes all inheritance claims from Ms. Callahan. Legal penalties will follow pending further proceedings. Property rights revert to Mrs. Callahan and her named heir, Lily Ann Callahan. It was done. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded. The farm was ours again. After the ruling, people crowded the hallway, some offering support, others avoiding my eyes. The cost of truth, I suppose. Not everyone wants to know the whole story. Marlene approached. For a moment, she looked almost human, tired, brittle, like the lies had hollowed her out. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I didn't want to lose everything. You already did, I said quietly. You just didn't notice until it was too late. She turned to Lily, reaching out, but Lily stepped back. You tried to scare me, Lily said. Now you don't get to speak like nothing happened. Marlene's lawyer pulled her away. They disappeared down the hall. And I stood there in the stillness, feeling the weight of 3 long months finally lift. Mr. Stanton joined us, smiling faintly. It's not over, he said. She may try to appeal. But today? Today is a victory. Justice? I asked. Closer than most ever get. That night, Lily and I walked the fields behind the barn. The wind had picked up, cool and sharp. The sky overhead was clear. You did it, she said softly. No, I corrected. We did. The land felt different beneath my boots. Like it recognized who had come home. The next morning, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and Lily by my side. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the first light was already spilling over the fields, turning the barn gold and the dew into diamonds. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. The farm looked the same, but everything had changed. The animals moved quietly in the distance, unaware that for the first time in months, they belonged to someone who truly saw them again. The land had been returned, yes, but more than that, Jacob's voice had been returned. His story was no longer buried. I held a mug of coffee in my hands, same one I'd used every morning since Jacob was a boy. The rim was chipped, the glaze cracked. But it held strong. Like me. Lily leaned against my shoulder. What now? She asked. I looked out across the land. Now we rebuild. Not just fences and finances. Trust. Legacy. She nodded. Later that day, word spread that Marlene was leaving town. Packed up what she had left and signed over the rest. The appeal never came. Her lawyer, from what I heard, dropped her after the court filings revealed she'd tampered with evidence directly. Some in the community looked at me with pity. Others with pride. A few still whispered, people always do. But I no longer needed everyone to believe me. I just needed the truth to stand. Ada came by with fresh bread and 2 jars of jam. She hugged me longer than usual. Jacob would be proud, she said. I just wish I could tell him. You did. Every step of the way. And I believed that. Some days, I still walk the barn at twilight. Not searching anymore. Just remembering. There's peace in that now. I took down the "for sale" sign that Marlene had hammered into the front gate last spring. Hauled it to the fire pit and burned it myself. It felt good. Final. But I didn't erase everything. I kept some of Marlene's letters. Not to hold a grudge. To remind myself how easily good people can be silenced when they're made to doubt their own voice. That won't happen again. This farm? It belongs to Lily now. Officially, legally, completely. But she insists I stay as long as I like. I won't live forever. But I can rest now. And when I'm gone, this land will still carry Jacob's name, and Lily's. And maybe, just maybe, a little girl will one day walk the fence line, curious about the stories buried under her boots, asking questions her mother answers with pride. Because we didn't just fight for land. We fought for memory. And we won.